Welcome to Manifest, hosted by international evangelist, teacher, and author Perry Stone. Enjoy unique insight into prophetic and practical truth. It's time to feast on fresh manna, so get ready to be blessed and encouraged. And now, here is your host and teacher, Perry Stone.
Oh, I want to welcome you to the Manifest telecast, and as you well know, if you follow us, that we're in the city of Jerusalem. We're on the Mount of Olives, right on the edge of the Mount of Olives, and right below me is a Jewish cemetery, and across in front of the Eastern Gate is a Muslim cemetery. And I had a friend of mine named Joseph years ago that was a driver. He drove for President Carter and Madeleine Albright, and he was our driver. And we were talking about this, and I did not know this. The way the Jewish bodies face, they face with their head this way. So based on Zechariah 14, when the Messiah comes back to the Mount of Olives, they follow him. They raise up and follow him into the city. The Muslims are faced the other way with their feet this way so that they stand up at the resurrection. And so it's real interesting, some of the traditions that you find here in the Holy City. Now, on the telecast today, I want to share with you something that is intriguing. Now, those who are live with me in Israel are our partners, and you're going to have to watch the telecast because this has heavy editing in it with maps and charts and some other things. But I'm going to do the teaching anyway as I talk about how God has marked the Holy Land. God has put certain marks on the mountains and certain marks in certain places that have been researched and discovered to identify that this is truly His city and His land. In the Bible, certain things were marked. For example, in Genesis, God says to Abraham, I want you to mark your male sons with circumcision. It's called the mark of the covenant. And every male child that was 8 days old at birth had to be circumcised. God would also mark places, allowing the patriarchs to build altars. Abraham built altars at Hebron, altars at Bethel. In fact, if I start naming them, we'd have to go through a long list. You had Jacob that built altars, you had Noah that built an altar. So the site was marked by altars. Now, this leads me for a moment to talk about this mountain behind me. Now, this is called Mount Moriah, and this is believed to be in Genesis 22, where Abraham brought his son Isaac and built the altar and put his son on the altar. And then, of course, God was testing him. God was never going to allow him to take his son's life. He was testing him to see if Abraham, the covenant man, was willing to give up his only son and watch God raise him up again, because Romans said Abraham counted God able to raise Isaac from the dead. If Abraham was willing to do it, God was going to one day have to send his only son and his life be taken. And he said, if my man who is a covenant man is even willing to give up his son, I'll be willing one day to give up mine. So that's really, in retrospect, what the test was about. But when Abraham built the altar, you discover that later David built an altar on this mountain to stop a plague. And at that time, it was called the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite, because the city back in that day was right on the hill here, the Jebusite city. The Jebusites controlled this area. And David, of course, when he became king, this became Mount Zion, the city of God, the mountain of the Lord, and later Solomon built this temple here. But when David built the altar, there's this really great Jewish tradition. And again, tradition can be based on just stories that people have told, or a lot of tradition has a truth somewhere in it. But it's believed that Adam built an altar here. It's believed that Shem is believed to have been Melchizedek, and there seems to be some evidence for it. Trust me, that's a whole other message we're not going to get into. Melchizedek was not the man's name, it was a title, King of Jerusalem, King of Peace, King of Jerusalem, King of Shalem, Melchizedek, Genesis 14. And that the altars that were built here, so when Abraham put that altar to lay Isaac on, it was actually an ancient altar, or the stones of an ancient altar where Adam had been. And then when David built the altar, he used the same stones that Abraham had used to build that altar to stop the plague. So the whole history of the Holy Land is marked by altars. When Joshua came across the Jordan River, as you know in the book of Joshua, he took 12 stones from the wilderness, put them in the waters, which were opened at that time when Israel crossed, took 12 stones from the Israeli side and put it in the water. And of course, that is where we taught you yesterday that John the Baptist was baptizing in the area where Joshua had crossed the Jordan River on his way to Jericho to take the promised land. Now, but what I want to do here is I want to show you that God says this. Let's look at some scriptures. Leviticus 12:26. Only the holy thing which you have and your vowed offerings you shall take and go to the place which the Lord God chooses. Deuteronomy 12:6. But you shall seek the place where the Lord your God chooses out of all your tribes to put his name for his dwelling place, and there you shall go. Now, 8 times, especially there in the Torah, God says, I'm going to take you to a place, and he also says, I'll put my name at that place. Now, most scholars are going to say, well, that simply means that God marked his place and they knew it was the mountain of the Lord. So because it's called the mountain of the Lord, his name is there. And so I began to study this idea of the place. It says that Abraham in Genesis 22 puts Isaac on the altar. Isaac says, Dad, where is the lamb? And Abraham says, God shall provide for himself a lamb. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, a lamb didn't show up. A ram showed up. Now, why would Abraham tell his son, God will himself provide a lamb? Because God himself became the lamb. In fact, I was asking some guys to read it in Hebrew, and they said, you know, that's really what Abraham saw. He saw God was going to himself become the lamb. And I can prove it because Abraham called the name of this place Jehovah Jireh. That's in the King James Bible, or Yahweh Yara, Jehovah Jireh, Yahweh Yara, which means he shall see to it, or he shall provide it. And watch what Moses wrote. Now, Moses wrote it because Moses said, he's telling the story now of this mountain. He's telling the story about Abraham offering Isaac. And he said, Moses wrote, as it is said to this day, in the mountain of the Lord it shall be seen. What shall be seen? Go back to what Abraham said, a lamb on the mountain. Now, why is it important? Because Jesus said, Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it. So, when Abraham is bringing Isaac to this mountain, Mount Moriah is where this happened, we do not know what he saw. We do not know when he saw it. I don't know if the guy went into a trance or he went into a vision, but he realized this would be the mountain. So, the point is that when Solomon built the temple, they couldn't build it anywhere else but on the holy mountain where the Lamb was supposed to come. And boy, I tell you what, I'm beginning to see this whole picture develop here with this idea of the Lamb and the holy mountain. And, you know, David buys the threshing floor over Anan the Jebusite. The point I want to make is this. When David bought the threshing floor, he knew the story of Melchizedek and the mountain. When Solomon built the temple, he knew the story of Melchizedek and the mountain and how his dad stopped a plague from destroying Jerusalem by building an altar here. So, this mountain was marked by the Lord. Now, here's what makes the whole story interesting about the marking of the mountain. I have the topo of the city of Jerusalem. How many know what a topo is? The topography where if you're building a building, you bring guys to shoot the levels. Like our partners are sitting theater style. So this may be 2 feet, but from the ground to there is 4 feet. And the next one is from the ground to 6 feet. See, it's 2 feet intervals. So what they do is they did a topo of the city of Jerusalem. If you took all of the rock off, if you took all the buildings off, you're all ready for this? Right in the heart of Mount Moriah, the top part where Abraham offered Isaac, it is in the shape of the Hebrew letter Yud. This is the topo map. The Hebrew letter Yud is the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Its symbol is the hand. It also is the first letter of God's name, Yud, He, Vav, He, Yahweh. It is the first letter of Jacob's name, Yaakov. It begins with the letter Yud. It's the first letter of Judah, tribe of Judah's name. It begins with the letter Yud. It's the first letter of the name for Jerusalem. In Hebrew, it begins with the letter Yud. And it is the sacred letter that's first found in God's name that represents the hand. So on the top of this mountain right here, it is shaped in the form of the letter Yud, if you took all the buildings off, and that represents the name of God and the first letter in His name. So God decides to put that first letter in everything's name that's sacred to Him. Come on, somebody, including Jacob. Jacob's name begins with the letter Yud. Wow. Now, it doesn't end there. There are different places if you come here on a tour, for example, of the traditional Catholic site for the crucifixion is Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is in this direction here. However, Constantine's mother, Helena, came to the Holy Land to try to find the holy spots. And she came several hundred years after it happened. This would be like me going to Washington after it had been destroyed and me trying to find 300 years later, where did Thomas Jefferson do this or where did George? Well, it's going to be based on tradition. So someone told her that we believe it was in this direction, but it was somebody, according to some sources, that wanted to sell the property to her. So they built the church there. And there are tombs there, don't get me wrong. There are other places. There are tombs near the Garden of Gethsemane. There are tombs on the Mount of Olives. So there's numerous places. And I'm not going to get into the controversy of where Christ was crucified and buried, but I want to share with you something interesting. There is a place that we go to, and we don't divide Catholics and Protestants. I don't do that. But the Protestants take this place as the traditional place. It was found by General Gordon in the 1800s, and it's in this direction north. And if you look at the hill, it's been chipped away at over the years, but the hill looks like a skull, okay? Then they found a tomb in there, a great, beautiful tomb. And as they began to put all their evidence together, they said, goodness, this appears to be where Christ was buried. Now, again, you can't guarantee it, but it's very possible. Now, this just might be a nugget as to why that might be the right spot, maybe. And if it's not the right spot, then this definitely has significance. Ready for this? The summit of Mount Sion or Mount Zion, the summit is 773 meters. The hill of the skull on top is 777. 777. Now, somebody said, well, why'd they do a whoa, Mabel? Well, I'm about to tell you. Because 7 is the number of perfection. 7 is the number of completion. 7 is a biblically sacred number. God rested on the seventh day. We could go into all the different meanings of the number 7, which would take up a little bit too much time here. So you have, number 1, up at the top of the mountain, the letter Yud. You have 777 for Golgotha, let's say traditional Golgotha, at least the peak of the mountain there, 777 meters. And some of the other things that I think you're going to find interesting is why did they call this mountain Mount Moriah? Now, on this direction here, you have 3 hills. The bottom area is Mount Ophel. And let me just go ahead and give you the scripture reference so that you can find it. 2 Chronicles talks about Mount Ophel. 2 Chronicles talks about Mount Ophel. Mount Zion, Psalms 2 and 6, is the slope in this direction this way. That's Mount Zion. Mount Moriah, 2 Chronicles 3 and 1 is where Solomon built the temple. So that's this mountain here. Now, in Mount Ophel is where the Pool of Siloam is located, and it's the place where a blind man that couldn't see washed and came back seeing. Mount Zion, it's Hebrew Mount Sion, but we call it in English Mount Zion. Mount Zion is where David built the tabernacle. And the Bible says, for in Mount Zion shall come forth deliverance. Mount Moriah is the place where the temple was built, right up here, and that's where the glory of God fell. So you have the washing of the water, then you have deliverance, and then you have the glory. I'm going to say it to you this way. There's 3 levels you progress in the things of the Spirit. First, you're saved. That's where your eyes are open. That's your washing, washed by the blood. But after you're saved, sometimes you still need deliverance from things. Now, in the old school, and I still believe in it, it's called sanctification. And that means it separates you from the things of the world. You lose your desire for the worldly things. Okay, that's sanctification. But don't stop there. I wrote a song, I used to sing it. I don't sing much anymore, so come on up a little bit higher. You've been in the valley way too long. It's time to get on up where you belong. And it's the 3 levels of the mountain. So you end up on Mount Moriah, where the glory and the Holy Spirit, the power of God is, and the worship is. All right. Now, in saying that, let me just tell you something interesting about the mountain. If you were to take all the, this even gets better. If you were to take all the buildings away and you go back to the old maps of Jerusalem, here's what you will discover. Now, we're talking about, this is a mountain. Everybody got that? We're on the mountain, right? Let's go into the valley and draw the valley. Let's go in front of the eastern gate and draw this. This valley curves from the Kidron Valley into the Valley of Hinnom. Then this curves all the way to the backside of the city on the west. With me? But where the western wall is, there's another valley. Now, you don't see it as much because it's been built up and it's got stones on it and modern buildings. That's called the Tyropian Valley, or the Valley of the Cheesemakers. And it forms this shape right here. Okay? Here we are. We're coming from here all the way to the Kidron Valley, all the way to the Valley of Hinnom in this direction. Here's the Valley of the Cheesemakers. Now, that doesn't mean much to you till you understand that in the Hebrew alphabet, there's a letter that looks like this that has not changed since the Proto-Canaanite form. It used to look like a W. Now in the Aramaic script, it has a curve on it. This is the exact shape of the letter Shin, which is the 21st letter of the Hebrew alphabet. That every mezuzah, and the mezuzah are the little containers that have the scriptures in them on a scroll form, and you see them in a synagogue, a Jewish home, a Jewish hotel. They put them on the right side of the door, slant them slightly, and they usually kiss the mezuzah coming in and going out, reminding them to have the word in them in their uprising, down sitting. That's what that's for. But the letter Shin is on every single mezuzah made in the world. It is the letter representing God's name. So, now think about this. So God says to the children of Israel, I'm going to take you to a place where I will put my name there. So when God created the place, He knew the alphabet was coming. He knew what form it would be in. So He decides to shape the original mountain so that when He looks down, He sees His name. He sees letters that represent Him. All right? But that's not really the wild one. That's not the crazy one. I'm going to tell you the crazy one. Ready? Years ago in Israel, I purchased a long satellite picture and brought it home with me. And it was rolled up. I mean, they're still purchasable today, but you'd have to know what you're looking for to see this. So my guy Gideon was in my office years ago, and he's looking at the satellite picture. He says, oh my goodness, do you see this? And I said, what? He said, this is God's name, Yod He Vav He, on the mountain. And I looked, and the way now this is not a retouched picture. The way the satellite was sitting, the shadows on the mountains above Jerusalem, you could see a little Yud, a little He, a little bit crooked, but you could still see it, Vav and He. Then we started looking at the map, and we found the letters Kaf and Yud. Then beside that, the letters Lamed, Vav, Tzion, and then under that, the Yud, He, Vav, He. Then under that, an Aleph, Peg, Resh, Yud, and Mem. Now that doesn't mean a thing to you, I know. So it's Ki, Luz, Yahweh, Ephraim. That's what those letters spell in Hebrew. Ki, Luz, Yahweh, Ephraim. Now, Luz was the early name of the area where Jacob had the dream. Remember that? It says he went to Luz, and there he had the dream of the ladder. Come on. And the angels coming up and down the ladder. Ephraim was the tribe that Joseph's son that came out of Egypt. So let me translate to you Ki, Luz, Yahweh, Ephraim. Ready? Because I want to tell you what the name Ephraim means. I'm going to tell you what the name Ki, Luz means. All right? Luz was later changed to Bethel. Okay? So here's what it means. Those letters on the mountain on a satellite map, and it's the shadow, it's the way the shadows are formed, means because of Bethel, the Lord has made me fruitful. And look, it's not something you got to guess. I took the map and marked with a black marker, and I hope, Charlie, we can have this after I'm talking to him. He's nodding his head. And so the point I want to make is God has marked the place. Now, I knew about this a couple years ago, and now, you know, it's real funny because you release something and some guy writes a book on it. Now, you know, I have a revelation. It's like, okay, whatever. But I reported this years ago, right after the discovery, because to me it was very exciting, and I want to give it to you quickly. Gilead is mine, Manasseh is mine, Ephraim also is the strength of mine, Judah is mine, Moab is my washpot. Over Edom I will cast my shoe. Now the areas, notice the areas, Manasseh, Ephraim, Judah, Moab, Edom, and also Philistia. Now I want to tell you what they found. They found and I've got other scriptures there, but let me get right to it. They were looking at satellite pictures, and they were looking in the area of Gilgal, where Joshua circumcised the children of Israel, right? And they found, this is the coolest thing on satellite, and it is not retouched. Somebody thousands of years ago made, how do you describe this? Walls of stone in the form of a shoe. I wish I could show you the picture. It's a perfect sandal, and there are several of them. And so they noticed that Gilgal in Hebrew means a wheel, or to be encircled, or to enclose in. And because the children of Israel are coming into the promised land, and we assume, because we know that they had animals to build the tabernacle with, if they had animals, they didn't want the animals running all over the place. So the idea by some archaeologists, and again, you talk to an archaeologist about one thing, you talk to 5, you get 10 opinions, okay? So everybody's got their opinion. But who built this? Why did they build it? Why they put it there? Because it is believed that they understood that God's footprints were on the land, and God said to Abraham, everywhere you put the sole of your foot. Everywhere you put the sole of your foot, I'm gonna give you the land. So they decide to mark the area that they're about to take with these rocks in the shape of a foot to identify we're back, we're God's people, and this is God's land and it belongs to Him. And they found that recently on a satellite. Well, I tell you what, I am out of time, and I have a few more notes here, but I think you get the picture that God has marked the land. It is called the Holy Land. It is the land of God. I'm here with my partners, and I hope many of you partners will go with me on our next Holy Land trip that will come up in the fall, every fall. And many of you that aren't partners can go with us as well. We do back-to-back trips, but God bless you. And as always, there's a new Manifest offer, and then we're going to tell you where we're coming to. We got some huge conferences coming up this year. We got some great things going to happen. We want you to be a part if you possibly can. Thank you from Jerusalem, where God marked the spot.
He is coming, and the world is ignorant of His arrival and the dangers of His kingdom. Some early fathers suggested that Emperor Nero would return from the dead as this man. Because of certain scriptures, some Greek scholars teach Judas Iscariot, called a son of perdition, will rise from the underworld to incarnate this future demonic-controlled individual, leading the world toward military annihilation. Others note that Hitler had certain biblical parallels that are predicted about this man, the man known as the Antichrist. In this DVD, Is the Antichrist Alive? Perry digs into the early church history and Greek word studies, tying prophetic scriptures together to present an accurate and enlightening narrative of what to expect with the Antichrist and his kingdom. You will hear this and much more. Along with this DVD is Perry's book, The Eighth Kingdom, which explains how radical Islam will impact the end times. This book is a detailed highlight from Perry's blockbuster book, Unleashing the Beast. You will read of the 6 major empires in the world that have risen and fallen, and how a 7th empire is coming, but will be swallowed up by an Islamic empire coming out of the Middle East. You will also read about the link between biblical and many Islamic prophecies and what they all have in common. You will discover the return of the ancient spirit of Babylon and be given another look at the mark of the beast. The Eighth Kingdom is coming, and this book will expose stunning information. This is a very timely offer, especially with the threat of global terrorism and the nuclear war drums beating in rogue nations. This DVD and book are available for a limited time, but can be yours now for a donation of just $30 or more. Order by calling 1-888-21-BREAD. That's 1-888-212-7323 or online at perrystone.org. You may also write us and enclose your donation of $30 or more and request offer EK127. Our address is Perry Stone, P.O. Box 3595, Cleveland, Tennessee 37320. This is a major prophetic resource, and the time to expose and explain the Eighth Kingdom is now. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for joining me on the Manifest Telecast. I hope that you will take the time to get the new resource material. It helps keep Manifest on the air, but you will spend hours learning some fresh insight on this subject. So there you have it. Healing Place Church, Wednesday, one service only, April the 4th in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Everybody come and join me there that possibly can. Sunday, April the 22nd, Resurrection Live Church, Granville, Michigan. That's all day on Sunday at the great church there. One of our May conferences, May 4th through the 6th, Princeton Pike Church of God in Hamilton, Ohio. And so go to perrystone.org and look at all the conferences. I mean, we've got the Partners Conference, the Prophetic Summit. You know, at the summit, I'm going to be preaching a message on artificial intelligence and the image of the beast because, well, I don't want to get into it because I'm running out of time, first of all, but there's an interesting subject on that. And also there are some things happening that I did not know were happening, and it's a major deal in Saudi Arabia that may be the fulfillment of Revelation 17 and 18. That's going to be dealt with at the Prophetic Summit. And we love the prophetic word, but if you go to one of our meetings, you'll discover that we don't just preach the prophetic word. We preach practical spiritual warfare, the Holy Spirit, faith, because you've got to have the whole of the Bible. That's why we call ourselves full gospel, because there's so much in the gospel. It's not just one thing. So be balanced and get into all the word and love all of the word, because that's where your strength for the end time is going to come from. Thank you for joining me. We hope to hear from you soon. God bless you.
You can't overpower God, you can't defeat God, you can't overthrow God. And if you're a Christian, then say Jesus, because He's the founder of the Christian faith.
As long as we're here, the people of God, then God is not finished with this nation. We're called to intercede for this nation, to get on our knees until the bitter, bloody end.
Perry Stone invites you to join him for his 2018 Israel Tour. The dates are November 19th through the 28th with an optional visit to Petra in the country of Jordan. Call 1-888-321-3629 or visit perrystone.org for more information and how to register. Seating is limited, so call today.